We really are a children's mental health agency. And the name has old roots that aren't necessarily reflective of who the agency is today. So just to be transparent with you, we are primarily, as an organization, a place that serves kids. Now, let me say where the word crisis has some relevance, and I'll get to that in a second. But we are an agency that provides mental health services for kids in multiple levels of care. So probably in Philadelphia, we have the most diverse number of levels of care in the city in terms of services, everything from home-based services, many different models of home-based services, school-based services. We have day programs for preschool-age children. We have an acute partial hospitalization program, which is for kids who are about to go into a psychiatric hospitalization. We're trying to prevent it, or they're coming out of a psychiatric hospitalization, and we're helping them adjust back to normal services and life. We have traditional outpatient clinics. We have a trauma clinic. We have a number of different types of services, many different types of services, all community-based, all based out in the world, so to speak. Where the relevance comes from is that CCTC took on, and these days everybody's talking about trauma, right? You hear the words become, but I'm going to give you an example. CCTC's trauma department was founded in 1989. So that gives you a hint. Like, it was the first children's trauma program in the city of Philadelphia. Even when the therapeutic nursery, which is our first program, was founded, a preschool program was founded. It was founded in 1971, and the people who founded it were doing it to create a structured milieu where kids could be treated for trauma they had experienced through domestic violence and community violence. I promise you, in the early 70s, no one was talking about preschool age trauma. They were talking about post-traumatic stress disorder for Vietnam vets coming back. So what's really important about this is that this agency's been invested in this trauma conversation long before sort of the rest of the world in Philadelphia caught up to the concept. So what's ironic is that many of the great models, like the Sanctuary model that we use here, which is a trauma-informed model, was invented in Philly, but had to go somewhere else to become famous, and then came back to Philadelphia through people like us. But the trauma piece is really where that conversation happens, because we've been very invested in this. For example, the trauma-informed model that we use as an organization, Sanctuary, we've been doing now for 15 or 16 years in a very formalized way. So we've been invested in this conversation in a way that has really defined how we see things. There's a phrase that we often use here that's really important to define how we see the work, which is, don't ask what's wrong with a child, ask what's happened to the child. So the idea being that if you're in and if you start thinking about this, you'll see how this connects to what I said earlier about protective factors and so on in early childhood experiences. And what I'm about to say is not just true for children, it's true for everybody. So I'll give you the child example first, though. You know, we often, like, if you're at this is how we speak. We don't realize we're speaking this way. It's the general public. But if you're in a restaurant, and then you look at the table next to you, and some kid is just tearing up the table. The parents are sort of paying attention to the kid. The kid's throwing stuff on the floor. He's out of control. Our instinct is to say, what's wrong with that kid? Or what's wrong with those parents? And we don't ask the question, what's happened to that kid or what's happened to those parents? We don't ask ourselves, where did that behavior begin? Like, what's the original cause of that behavior? Because what we don't understand about trauma very often is that these behaviors begin with some past experience. And that behavior during that past experience, let's say a kid watching his mom get beat up by her boyfriend 2 or 3 times a week when he'd come home drunk. That kid's behavior during those moments was really appropriate, you know, hiding in his room, like whatever it might be. But now the boyfriend's gone, mom's gotten help, they're doing, everything looks fine. It's 2 years later and a kid's still doing what some people might call that bizarre behavior. But it was behavior that was adaptive during the crisis, but he didn't stop doing it. And now it's maladaptive in normal circumstances. Well, we all do that to some extent. So it's as simple as you and I work together, and we've worked together for 2 years. And one day we're having a conversation in the morning about some problem, and you're just being difficult. You're being a pain in the conversation. Well, what we typically do is, in my brain, I start going, well, what did I do to him? What's his problem? When in reality, I don't know that your mom didn't tell you that she has to go get a test for cancer tomorrow. I don't know that your girlfriend didn't dump you this morning. I don't know that your kid didn't bring home an F from school. I don't know. But I'm assuming that the behavior, I'm giving meaning to the behavior I'm seeing in front of me that has nothing to do with me. So that's what we've tried to build here, is that everything that we do and all the work, how we interact with each other as staff, how we interact with each other, with our partners, with our friends. When we go into a school, we always tell our staff, you're in their house. So you've got to build trust. You've got to build this relationship. Don't start telling them how they can do things better at the beginning. You have to gain their trust. And then eventually they're going to ask you to help. And then you're going to be able to teach them and support them about how to work with kids with these kind of challenges and how they might do things a little differently to be successful with kids with these kind of behavioral challenges. And then over time, they won't know how they ever got by without you. And that fits into how we think about the kids and the families, our partners that we work with, and our fellow staff, how we interact with each other. Always try to understand what someone else's pain point is. It may not be obvious at the beginning, but if you understand other people's pain points, you'll understand the behavior that you're witnessing. But the behavior is just a symptom of consequence, a reflection of whatever is really going on with that person. We are feelings-driven animals. We are not cognitive as much as we want to think we are. Our feelings and emotions drive us. And hopefully we can manage that effectively. So that's kind of the philosophy behind how we think about a lot of the work that we do here.